Daphne Forbos from the Hashi channel. Today we'll be learning about the labor movement. The labor movement saw a rise in populism, saw an increase in the amount of railroads. They also saw the formation of strikes and unions, and the economic depression that happened during that time period.
The Gilded Age is often marked by the growth of railroads due to the expansion of the country. Congress authorized the construction of numerous railroads, and the federal government initially provided subsidies by the railroad companies in exchange for discounted rates. The Union Pacific Railroad, for example, began construction on the Transcontinental Line in Nebraska during the Civil War and pushed westward, while the Stanford Central Pacific Railroad pushed eastward from Sacramento.
Beginning with Lincoln's purpose to unite the nation, the Transcontinental Railroad took rise. A bunch of California business owners decided it was a good idea, and they started by employing Chinese immigrants for cheap and hard labor. They had to build a railroad over mountainous terrain. Time for a break.
Dodger's army was about to fight his first major battle.
Unfortunately, not all railroading profits were earned in a legitimate manner. The industry was filled with dozens of scams and embezzlement schemes to make insiders rich. Railroads inflated prices of their own stocks and doled out uncompetitive rebates to favored companies. Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act, which outlawed railroad rebates and kickbacks, but this had almost no effect and has been known as the toothless legislation.
In 1877, railroad workers, notably Chinese immigrants, decided to strike for the overuse and abuse that they had undergone as workers for these California owners building the railroads. Not only were these strikes held in railroad companies, but also all around the country, the working population decided to revolt. And they created strikes and labor unions in order to demand their rights and fight against their employers. In 1866, the National Labor Union was formed, made up of unskilled farmers and factory workers, but they excluded women and African Americans, and with that they fought for the rights that they thought they deserved in the workplace.
The workforce changed drastically as the economy became more industrialized and mechanized. Competition for jobs grew stiffer as millions of women, immigrants, blacks, and farmers moved to the cities to find work. Founded in 1866, the first National Labor Union was simply called the National Labor Union. The NLU sought to represent both skilled and unskilled laborers in one large organization. Though it had no ties to either political party, the union generally supported any candidate who would fight for shorter working days, higher wages, and better working conditions. Another union, called the Knights of Labor, picked up where the NLU left off. It too united all skilled and unskilled laborers, but unlike the NLU, it allowed blacks and women to join. Many of the fledgling unions that first went on strike during the latter half of the century did so to protest poor working conditions, long work days, and inadequate pay. One of the first strikes was the Homestead Strike, which protested wage cuts at a steel plant in Pennsylvania. Another significant strike was the Pullman Strike, in which over 150,000 American railroad union members refused to work.
The American Federation of Labor, led by Samuel Gompers, was formed in the purpose of uniting independent unions. The Depression of 1893 was caused when investors of the U.S. Treasury traded silver for gold. Depleting almost all of our gold almost crashed our economy and also discredited our foreign economic relations. This forced Cleveland to have a much more aggressive second term as he had to take action.
Right after President Grover Cleveland took office, that's when the Depression of 1893 hit. This was one of the worst depressions in American history, with the unemployment rate exceeding 10% for half a decade. This depression was signaled by a financial panic in 1893 and has been blamed on the deflation dating back to the Civil War, the gold standard, and monetary policy, as well as underconsumption, which basically means the economy was producing goods and services at a higher rate than society was consuming. This eventually led firms to reduce employment and cut back production. The U.S. Treasury was already nearly empty, and on top of that, wily investors traded silver for gold in a scheme that sent the gold reserve sinking below the $100 million mark. If this trend continued, there wouldn't have been enough gold to back the paper currency in circulation. The U.S. would have then had to go off the gold standard, and this would have crashed the economy completely.
We cannot forget the rise of the populist movement during this time period.
The populist movement arose primarily in response to the 1890 McKinley Tariff. This was a very high tariff that hurt Western and Southern farmers in particular, who sold their harvests on unprotected markets but were basically forced to buy expensive manufactured goods. To protest the tariff, these farmers helped vote Republicans out of the House of Representatives in the 1890 congressional elections. Basically, by the time the elections of 1892 rolled around, the Farmers Alliance, which was a political party formed in the late 1880s, merged with the other liberal Democrats to form the Populist Party. The Populists nominated former Greenback Party member James B. Weaver for president and campaigned for cheap silver money. Populists also displayed their power by campaigning for government ownership of all railroad telephone companies, one-term limit for presidents, immigration restrictions, shorter workdays, and a referendum.
All of us at the HashU channel hope that you have been enlightened by this presentation of the labor movement. Please tune back into the HashU channel next week when we have a special on Daphne Corpus.